The hanging rope bit into Zara Ackerman's delicate skin as she dangled several feet above the dusty ground, struggling for breath. The hastily scrawled wooden sign around her neck declaring "thief" in crude letters that belied the injustice of her situation. It was 1878 in the unforgiving town of Copper Ridge, Arizona Territory, where the law bent to the will of whoever had the most money or the most guns. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly, offering no respite as Zara's vision began to blur, her lungs burning for air that wouldn't come. From the edge of town, Ethan Wilder watched the scene unfold with mounting horror. The 30-year-old cowboy had only intended to stop in Copper Ridge long enough to restock supplies before continuing north to Montana Territory, where his brother had land. Now, those plans evaporated like morning dew as he witnessed the crowd's bloodthirsty enthusiasm for the execution. "What in God's name?" he muttered, spurring his horse forward without a second thought. The crowd had gathered in the town square, a mixture of miners, farmers, and townsfolk all shouting and jeering. A large man with a heavy beard seemed to be leading them, his face flushed with righteous anger. "Let this be a lesson," the bearded man bellowed. "This is what happens to thieves in Copper Ridge." Ethan's trained eye assessed the situation quickly. The girl couldn't be more than 20, her dark hair falling across her face as she struggled weakly now, her movements becoming more sluggish with each passing second. Drawing his revolver, Ethan fired a shot into the air. The crowd parted instantly, startled by the interruption. Without hesitation, he urged his horse through the opening, reaching the young woman in seconds. "Step back," he commanded, his voice carrying the authority of a man who'd seen his share of death and wasn't afraid to face more. "This ain't your concern, stranger," the bearded man snarled, stepping forward. "This thief stole from my store. Justice is being served." Ethan aimed his revolver at the rope above the girl's head. "No court I know of sentences young women to hang for theft. This isn't justice, it's murder. You interfere and you'll hang beside her," someone shouted from the crowd. With steady hands, Ethan fired, severing the rope with a single shot. The girl collapsed to the ground, and in one fluid motion, he dismounted and knelt beside her, checking for signs of life while keeping his gun trained on the advancing mob. She was alive, but barely. Her face was tinged blue, angry red marks circling her slender neck where the rope had bitten into her flesh. "Anyone takes another step, they'll be leaving this square with a bullet in them," Ethan warned, his eyes hard as flint. "I'm taking this girl to a doctor and then we're going to sort this out proper." The crowd murmured angrily, but no one advanced. The bearded man, however, wasn't so easily deterred. "That's Victor Holden's daughter," he said, pointing to the unconscious girl. "She ain't no thief. This is between him and me. He refused to sell his land, so I'm teaching him a lesson." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Using an innocent girl to settle a land dispute, you're lower than a snake's belly." He carefully lifted Zara in his arms, her weight slight against his chest. "I'll be taking her to the doctor now. Anyone follows, they die." With one arm supporting Zara and the other holding his revolver, Ethan backed toward his horse. The crowd watched in tense silence, anger and uncertainty warring on their faces. "This ain't over, cowboy," the bearded man threatened. "You made an enemy today. Wouldn't be the first time," Ethan replied coolly, somehow managing to mount his horse while still holding Zara. "But unlike this girl, I can shoot back." With that, he spurred his horse forward, leaving the stunned crowd behind. The town's doctor lived at the far end of the main street, and Ethan wasted no time getting there, all too aware of the precious seconds ticking away. Dr. Harold Biggs was a grizzled old man who'd seen everything the frontier had to offer. He didn't ask questions when Ethan kicked open his door, merely pointing to an examination table where Ethan could lay Zara down. "Lynch mob?" the doctor asked, already examining the rope burns on her neck. "Something like that," Ethan replied, keeping watch at the window. "Man named Victor Holden's daughter. Know him?" Dr. Biggs nodded grimly. Decent rancher about 5 miles east, been feuding with Samuel Green for months over water rights. Green owns the general store. The bearded man, Ethan muttered. Is she going to make it? The doctor worked quickly, applying salves to her neck and checking her pulse. Caught her in time, I think. Throat's swollen, but she's breathing better already. Zara stirred on the table, her eyes fluttering open, wide with panic as she gasped for breath and clutched at her throat. Easy, Miss Holden, Dr. Biggs soothed. You're safe now. This man cut you down. Her terrified eyes found Ethan's, and something in his chest tightened. They were the deepest shade of blue he'd ever seen, like the mountain lakes he'd encountered in Colorado. Samuel Green, she rasped, her voice barely audible. He framed me, said I stole, but I didn't. Save your strength, Ethan advised. Rest now, we'll sort this out later. Dr. Biggs prepared a tonic for her throat. She needs to stay here tonight. I'll send word to her father. Ethan nodded, still watching the street outside. It wouldn't take long for Green and his supporters to regroup. I'll stay too, he decided. They might come looking to finish what they started. As darkness fell over Copper Ridge, Ethan sat in a chair by the door, his revolver across his lap. Zara drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally whimpering in pain or fear. During one of her more lucid moments, she beckoned him closer. "Why did you help me?" she whispered, her voice still raw. Ethan considered the question. "Where I come from, we don't hang women without a trial. Especially not for something as paltry as theft." "I didn't steal anything," she insisted. "Green wants my father's land. When I refused his advances, he said he'd make me pay." Ethan's expression darkened. "That explains a lot. Get some rest, Miss Holden. Your father will be here soon." But Victor Holden never arrived. Instead, just after midnight, the sound of approaching horses woke Ethan from his light doze. He moved to the window, peering through a crack in the curtains. "Trouble," he announced quietly to Dr. Biggs, who had also woken. "Green and about a dozen men, all armed." Zara struggled to sit up, fear evident in her eyes. "They'll kill us all." Dr. Biggs hurried to a cabinet, pulling out an old shotgun. "I've got this place pretty well stocked. Back room has no windows, might be safer there." Ethan shook his head. "They'll just burn us out." "No, I need to face them." He turned to Zara. "Your father's ranch, is there somewhere safe you could go if we get you out of town?" Zara nodded. "Old cabin in the north pasture. My father would have gone there if there was trouble." The pounding on the door began, followed by Green's booming voice. "Doctor, send out the girl and that interfering cowboy and we'll let you live." Ethan quickly outlined his plan to Dr. Biggs, who nodded grimly. "There's a back door through my storeroom. I keep a horse in the shed behind. Take her and go. I'll hold them off as long as I can." "You sure?" Ethan asked, already helping Zara to her feet. The old doctor smiled wryly. "Been in this town 30 years. About time I stood for something." Ethan respected the man's courage. "We'll send help as soon as we can," as they slipped through the back room, doctor. Biggs positioned himself by the front door, shotgun ready. Ethan could hear him engaging the mob, his voice steady despite the danger. The night air was cool against Zara's skin as Ethan helped her onto the doctor's horse, then mounted behind her. He kept one arm around her waist, steadying her as they rode out of town, taking a roundabout route to avoid being seen. "My father," Zara whispered, leaning against Ethan's chest for support. "I'm worried Green might have already gotten to him." "One problem at a time," Ethan counseled, guiding the horse through a dense thicket of mesquite. "First, we get you somewhere safe." They rode through the night, Zara occasionally directing him with a weak gesture when they reached a fork in the trail. By dawn, they arrived at a small cabin nestled against a hillside, partially concealed by cottonwood trees. No smoke rose from the chimney, and the place had an abandoned feel that made Ethan uneasy. He helped Zara dismount, then approached the cabin cautiously, gun drawn. "Pa." Zara called weakly, her voice still hoarse from her ordeal. The cabin door creaked open at Ethan's touch, revealing a sparse but tidy interior. A cold hearth, a simple table with 2 chairs, a narrow bed in the corner, but no Victor Holden. "He's not here," Zara said, disappointment evident in her voice. Ethan helped her to the bed. "When did you last see him?" "Yesterday morning. He went to town to speak with the sheriff about Green's threats." Her eyes widened with sudden realization. Green must have intercepted him. Ethan busied himself starting a fire, his mind racing. "The sheriff, is he honest?" Zara laughed bitterly, wincing at the pain it caused her throat. "Sheriff Mills, he's in Green's pocket, has been for years." "That complicates things," Ethan admitted, setting a pot of water to boil. He found some dried herbs hanging from the ceiling and added them to the water, hoping to make something soothing for Zara's throat. "But we're safe for now. Rest while you can." As Zara drifted into an exhausted sleep, Ethan kept watch from the cabin's small window, contemplating their next move. He'd only planned to pass through Copper Ridge, and now he was embroiled in a land dispute with a ruthless man who had an entire town under his thumb. And yet, looking at Zara's sleeping form, her dark hair fanning across the pillow, he couldn't bring himself to regret his intervention. The sun was high in the sky when the sound of an approaching horse jolted Ethan from his thoughts. He moved silently to the door, gun ready, positioning himself where he could see without being seen. A lone rider approached, an older man with a weathered face and a bloodied shirt. Even injured, there was a dignity to his bearing that told Ethan this must be Victor Holden. "Mr. Holden," Ethan called, stepping into view but keeping his gun ready. "Your daughter's inside." The man's head snapped up, his hand moving to his own weapon before recognition dawned. "You're the one who saved her. Dr. Biggs got word to me before they burned his place." Ethan's stomach dropped. "They burned the doctor out," Victor nodded grimly, dismounting with obvious pain. "He got away, barely, heading for Tucson to fetch the federal marshal. Green's gone too far this time." Inside the cabin, the reunion between father and daughter was emotional. Zara wept as she saw her father's injuries, a gunshot wound to the shoulder and various cuts and bruises from what was clearly a severe beating. "Green ambushed me on the road back from town," Victor explained as Ethan helped clean and bandage his wounds. "Left me for dead in a ravine. Took me all night to get back to the ranch, only to find it burned to the ground." Zara's eyes filled with fresh tears. "Our home." Victor gripped his daughter's hand. "Buildings can be rebuilt, Zara. You're alive, that's what matters." Ethan listened quietly, his resolve hardening. "Green won't stop. He'll keep coming until he gets what he wants." "The land," Victor confirmed. "There's a vein of silver running through the north section. He's known about it for months, been trying to buy me out, then resorted to threats. And when that didn't work, he tried to use your daughter to force your hand." Ethan finished the thought. Victor's eyes darkened with anger. "I'll kill him for that." "Not if you're dead," Ethan pointed out practically. "We need a plan that doesn't end with all of us swinging from ropes." They spent the afternoon discussing options, with Zara contributing despite her injured throat. It was clear that Green had most of the town either on his payroll or too frightened to stand against him. The nearest federal marshal was in Tucson, at least 3 days' ride away. "We can't wait that long," Victor insisted. "Green will have men searching every inch of my property by now." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "Then we bring the fight to him, but on our terms." As night fell, they refined their plan. Ethan would return to town under cover of darkness to gather intelligence and, if possible, find allies among those who might have grievances against Green. Victor would secure the cabin and prepare for a potential siege, while Zara, much to her frustration, would remain hidden and continue to recover. "I'm not some delicate flower," she protested, her blue eyes flashing with determination despite the ugly bruising around her neck. "No," Ethan agreed, finding himself increasingly drawn to her spirit, "but you're still injured and we need you at full strength for what's coming." Before he left, Zara pulled him aside, her hand resting lightly on his arm. "Why are you doing this? You could ride away, find somewhere peaceful." Ethan considered her question seriously. "Maybe I'm tired of riding away," he finally said. "Maybe some things are worth fighting for." The look that passed between them lingered, filled with unspoken understanding and something else, something neither was ready to name. Ethan returned to Copper Ridge under the cover of darkness, leaving his horse a mile out and approaching on foot. The town was quiet, most buildings dark except for the saloon, which buzzed with activity. He slipped through the shadows, making his way to what remained of Dr. Biggs's office, a charred skeleton that smelled of ash and malice. From conversations overheard outside the saloon, Ethan learned that Green had declared himself the new law in town, with Sheriff Mills mysteriously disappeared. A reward had been posted for Ethan and the Holdens, dead or alive. More troubling was the news that Green had brought in additional gunmen from Tombstone, preparing for what he called a final solution to the Holden problem. Ethan was about to retreat when a hand grabbed his shoulder from behind. He spun, ready to fight, only to find himself face to face with a small, wiry man with intelligent eyes. "You're the cowboy who saved Victor's girl," the man whispered. "Name's Perry Mason. I run the livery. Not everyone in this town supports Green's madness." Ethan studied the man carefully before nodding. "How many feel as you do?" "Enough," Perry answered. "Green's rule has been cruel. Many have suffered, but fear kept us silent. What you did standing against him alone, it gave people hope. Hope was a start, but Ethan needed more than that." "I need information and possibly help. Green's planning something big," Perry nodded grimly. "Dawn raid on the Holden property. He's got 20 men well armed. They leave at first light. 20 against 3, the odds weren't good, especially with Victor injured and Zara still recovering." But Perry's next words gave Ethan a glimmer of hope. "There are 6 of us willing to fight. Not much, but we're good shots and know the land." By the time Ethan returned to the cabin, he had the beginnings of a plan. 6 townsmen would join them, bringing the total to 9 against Green's 20. Still not great odds, but better than before. Zara was awake when he arrived, her face lighting up at his return. "You're back," she breathed, relief evident in her voice. "Told you I would be," he replied, oddly touched by her concern. "Where's your father?" "Resting," she said, gesturing to the back room. "His fever broke an hour ago." Ethan quickly shared what he'd learned. Zara listened intently, her expression growing more determined with each word. "So we make our stand here," she concluded. 9 against 20, not here," Ethan corrected. "Green expects to find you at the Holden Ranch. We'll let him search while we set up an ambush along the route back to town." They spent the night preparing, with Zara insisting on taking an active role despite her father's and Ethan's objections. By dawn, they had moved to a rocky outcropping overlooking the main trail between the Holden Ranch and Copper Ridge. It offered excellent cover and multiple escape routes if things went badly. Perry and his men arrived just before sunrise, bringing extra weapons and ammunition. They were an unlikely band: a livery owner, a blacksmith, a barber, and 3 ranch hands who'd had run-ins with Green in the past. But all were determined, their faces set with the resolve of men who had decided that some injustices could no longer be tolerated. As the sun crested the horizon, they spotted Green's party riding toward the Holden Ranch, just as Perry had predicted. They waited in tense silence as the minutes stretched into hours. What if they split up to search the property? Victor worried, his face pale from his injuries but his eyes alert. "Then we adjust," Ethan replied calmly. "But Green's arrogant. He'll keep his men close, thinking numbers give him the advantage." Sure enough, by mid-morning, Green's frustrated party returned along the trail, having found nothing at the ranch. Ethan gave the signal, and their small force took position. The ambush was perfectly executed. Green's men rode into a crossfire that unhorsed 5 before they even realized what was happening. The rest scattered for cover, returning fire wildly. In the chaos, Ethan spotted Green trying to escape, spurring his horse up a side trail. Without hesitation, Ethan pursued, catching up to the man as he reached a small clearing. Green turned, his face contorted with rage, and fired. The bullet grazed Ethan's side, tearing through his shirt and leaving a burning trail across his ribs. But it didn't stop him from tackling Green from his horse. both men tumbling to the ground in a tangle of limbs and curses. "You should have minded your own business, Cowboy," Green snarled, reaching for a knife at his belt. Ethan caught his wrist, twisting until the knife fell. "Hanging an innocent woman became my business," he grunted, landing a solid punch that snapped Green's head back. The fight was brutal but brief. For all his bluster, Green was a businessman, not a fighter. Ethan subdued him quickly, binding his hands with the man's own belt. Back at the ambush site, the shooting had stopped. 3 of Green's men lay dead, several more wounded. The rest had surrendered or fled. Among their own group, the blacksmith had taken a bullet to the leg, and one of the ranch hands was nursing a shoulder wound, but miraculously, no one had been killed. Green, bloodied and defeated, glared at Victor Holden. "This changes nothing. I have friends in high places." "Not as high as you think," came a new voice. Dr. Biggs emerged from the trees, accompanied by a stern-looking man wearing a federal marshal's badge. "Marshal Jenkins," the doctor introduced, made better time than expected. The marshal surveyed the scene with practiced eyes. "Samuel Green, you're under arrest for attempted murder, corruption, and a list of other charges I'll enjoy reading to you in full." The relief that washed over the group was palpable. Green and his surviving men were taken into custody to be transported to Tucson for trial. Dr. Biggs tended to the wounded, his experienced hands working quickly despite his own recent ordeal. In the days that followed, Copper Ridge began the slow process of healing. Sheriff Mills was found locked in his own jail, having resisted Green's final push for complete control. With Green's influence removed, people came forward with years of grievances: stolen land, rigged contracts, threatened families. Victor and Zara began rebuilding their ranch, aided by many of the townspeople who sought to make amends for their silence during Green's reign. Ethan stayed to help, telling himself it was just until the Holdens were settled, just until the marshal returned with news of Green's prosecution, just until the ranch house had a roof again. But as days turned to weeks and weeks to months, the excuses grew thinner and the truth became harder to ignore. It wasn't obligation keeping him in Copper Ridge, it was Zara. They worked side by side rebuilding the ranch, talking long into the evenings about everything and nothing. He told her about his years drifting after the war, about the brother in Montana he hadn't seen in 5 years, about his dream of someday having a place of his own. She shared her childhood memories, her mother's early death, her father's devotion, and her own fierce love for the land that had nearly cost her life. One evening, as they sat on the newly built porch watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson, Zara finally asked the question that had been hovering between them. "Are you ever going to tell me why you really stayed, Ethan?" He looked at her, taking in the healing rope marks that would forever circle her neck, the strength in her eyes that no trauma had dimmed, the quiet grace with which she had faced rebuilding her life. "I think you know," he said softly. "I'd like to hear it anyway," she replied, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Ethan had never been a man of many words, preferring action to declaration. But for Zara, he found the words he'd been holding back. "I stayed because the thought of leaving you behind hurt worse than any bullet, because in all my wandering, I've never found a place that felt like home until I met you." She moved closer, her hand finding his. "Even though meeting me nearly got you killed." He laughed, entwining his fingers with hers. That just made it interesting. Their kiss was gentle at first, tentative with the newness of acknowledged feelings, then deepening with the passion that had been building between them for months. Victor, watching from inside the house, smiled to himself. He'd seen the way the two looked at each other, had known this moment was coming. The cowboy who had risked everything for a stranger had become family in all but name. It was time to make it official. The wedding took place that autumn, a simple affair in the newly rebuilt Holden Ranch house. Dr. Biggs, fully recovered and back in his rebuilt practice, gave the bride away alongside her proud father. Perry Mason served as best man, beaming with the satisfaction of a man who had helped right a terrible wrong. As Ethan and Zara exchanged vows, the gathered townspeople witnessed not just the union of two people, but the rebirth of their community. Green's reign of terror had ended, replaced by the possibility of justice and mutual respect. Later that night, as they stood alone under a canopy of stars, Ethan held his new wife close, marveling at the twist of fate that had brought him to Copper Ridge. "I was just passing through," he murmured against her hair. "Never planned to stay." Zara laughed softly, the sound no longer pained but full and rich. "Thank God for unplanned detours." "And desperate stands," he added, kissing the marks on her neck with tender reverence. "And new beginnings," she finished, turning in his arms to face him. "What about your brother in Montana? He'll visit," Ethan assured her. "Or we will, but this is home now." 1 year later, Copper Ridge had transformed. With Green gone and his corrupt network dismantled, honest businesses flourished. Victor Holden, fully recovered from his injuries, had been elected mayor, committed to ensuring no one man could ever again hold such power over the town. The Holden Wilder Ranch prospered under Ethan and Zara's joint management. The silver vein that Green had coveted yielded enough to expand their operations while providing jobs for many in the community. And in the bedroom of their ranch house, a new life began stirring. Zara's pregnancy, now 5 months along, brought a glow to her face that made Ethan's heart swell with pride and love each time he looked at her. "Boy or girl?" he asked, his hand resting on the gentle swell of her belly as they lay in bed one night. "Does it matter?" She returned, covering his hand with her own. "Not a bit," he admitted. "Though I'm hoping for your spirit and my common sense," she laughed, playfully swatting his arm. "My spirit is what attracted you in the first place, Ethan Wilder." "True enough," he conceded. "That and your remarkable ability to survive being hanged." Her expression sobered slightly. "We never talk about that day." "No need," he said simply. "It's behind us." But Zara shook her head. "Not entirely. I never properly thanked you for what you did. Standing against that mob alone, not knowing me, not owing me anything, it was the bravest thing I've ever witnessed." Ethan considered this. "Not brave," he finally said. "Just right. Some things you see and can't unsee, some wrongs you can't just ride past. And some detours lead exactly where you're meant to be," she finished, snuggling closer to him. As they drifted to sleep, Ethan reflected on the strange path that had led him here. A chance arrival in a troubled town, a desperate act of intervention, a stand against corruption that had seemed hopeless at the time, all culminating in this moment of perfect contentment. Outside, the desert night wrapped around their home like a protective cloak. The land that had nearly cost them everything now sustained them, its harsh beauty a daily reminder of their journey. And in the quiet darkness, their child grew stronger, a living testament to the future they had fought to secure. For Ethan Wilder, who had drifted for years without purpose, and Zara Ackerman Wilder, who had nearly lost everything to one man's greed, the lessons were clear. Justice sometimes required courage in the face of overwhelming odds. Love often appeared in the most unexpected circumstances. And sometimes, the greatest acts of heroism weren't grand battles, but simple human decency, cutting down a hanging rope, facing a mob alone, refusing to look away when it would have been easier to ride on. In the years that followed, their story became something of a legend in Copper Ridge. The tale of the drifting cowboy who saved a young woman from a lynch mob evolved with each telling, growing more dramatic with time. But for Ethan and Zara, the truth was enough: a chance encounter, a desperate stand, and a love that had survived the worst humanity had to offer, only to emerge stronger for the trial.